Welcome to the Australian Property Investment Podcast with your host, Aaron-Christie David. Each episode, we ask an expert to share their key insights for aspiring investors to make confident property choices.
G'day everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast, all about helping you make better property choices. I'm Aaron-Christie David, founder of Atelier Wealth, mortgage broking business specializing in helping property investors. Each week, we have the pleasure of speaking to leading experts in their field. This week's a little bit different. We've got a client in the studio with us. G'day, Kim. How you doing?
Hi, Aaron. Good, thank you.
Excellent. You're still an expert nonetheless, Kim.
Okay.
Yeah, you are. But Kim, what I wanted to bring you in today for was to share your journey. Kim, you've got an extraordinary story, which is you've gone down the path of doing it yourself, which we love to see. And I think it takes a brave person to go, I'm going to tread my own path and find the properties myself, negotiate, renovate. You've got your hands dirty, and you're not afraid of that as well. So for a lot of our own clients that are going on the investment journey, they tend to get overwhelmed. They tend to get maybe sold a property by someone with fancy brochures, for example. There's a lot of misinformation out there as well. Family, friends, accountant, mortgage broker, financial planner, all in your ear about how to buy that property. So that's why we've got a lot of time for you, Kim, because I think you're someone that's confident in their own skin as an investor. Even though you're shrugging your shoulders, you are super confident. And that's what we want to say, because it's taken your journey has taken some time to get to where you are. But I think the flip side is that you played the long game as well, which is, I think that's a real testament to yourself, Kim. So what I want to do is start off with a little bit about your background and kind of where you started with your first purchase. And then we'll start from there and we'll work our way through your portfolio, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I bought my first property probably about 8-9 years ago, back in 2010.
Yeah.
It was before the boom, which was nice. I wish I'd bought a ton of properties before the boom.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, but I am grateful that I at least had that one under my belt for the time being. That property was off the plan. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1-car space. It was for me to live in at my ripe young age and really just make the most of it. And I think back then I didn't know anything about property. I didn't even know what strata was back then when I bought my first property.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yes, yeah. Very much so. I think I'm lucky because I did buy before the boom. Yeah. I got it for a great price when you compare other properties in that same area now within the market. Yeah. It did what I needed it to do at the time. I had it for 5 years, and in that time, it almost doubled in price. Without any renovations or really boosting it myself in any way. It was the market that increased that value, which I'm very grateful of. I think back then, you were my broker back then when I had Mascot, and I really didn't understand the value of equity.
Yep.
I didn't understand the value of rising market prices and how I could take advantage of that at the time.
Yeah.
And I look back and I kind of wish that I'd done things a little bit differently, because I would have put myself in a better position now. Still in a great position, still managed to get back on the horse and buy more properties after that. But, I definitely learned a lot from having Mascot it was in Mascot, by the way. But living
you don't have that at the moment.
No, I don't have that at the moment. It's since been sold.
Yeah.
But
was it a big decision to sell it? Because I know that's something that we spoke about.
Yeah.
Yes, every investor generally buys maybe to hold. Everyone's a little bit different, but your decision to then sell the property?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of not only knowing that I wasn't going to have capital gains tax on it because I physically lived in the property, but also just being able to recognise, don't be afraid to sell properties when it's time to sell it. It's done what you need it to do. It's, mine more than doubled in price. I made enough money on it. I wasn't going to pay capital gains tax on that large increase. And the area was just getting too dense for my liking, and it was getting harder to borrow from the banks. It just wasn't moving in the way that it had previously moved. And I know I spoke to you so many times, should I sell it? Should I not sell it? What should I do? And I made the decision ultimately to sell it.
Yep.
And I'm glad I did. I don't regret it at all, because it put me in a better position to get the next one and the next one and the next one. It was just that leverage to get me onto the rolling stone of property investment.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the beauty is you were very lucky. The first one did very well for you, because this is typically where people get stuck, is they'll buy the first one, hope that it goes up.
Yes.
You were fortunate, obviously the market did some heavy lifting for you, but also you realise that it peaked, and I'm going to cash in my chips right now, and then move on to the next opportunity, right?
Absolutely. I think it was like good and bad having that peak, because having that peak, you sort of think to yourself, is it this easy to make money off property? But really, I just got in at the right time before the boom. And most properties in Sydney really, either quarter or double their value in property.
The data, the dartboard in Sydney, and it just, it increased, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think I got lucky with that, but that was like my first sort of baby. That was my first property. That was my first time in the market. Yeah. And I learned so much from, the property terms and the different expenses you might be incurring, not only from an owner occupier, but eventually I did move out and rented the property out, and it did become an investment property.
Yep.
From a rental perspective. So I did eventually move out, and then just getting a taste of what it's like to be a landlord and what it's like to have a tenant and have tenant problems and all the other things that come with that. And then obviously your taxes change and all of the things that you learn from being a landlord and having a tenant in your property and having a fully working investment property under your belt. That was my first experience, having that first property, obviously.
And your journey since, Kim? So you sold Mascot?
Yeah, I sold Mascot. Took the cash. Just before I sold Mascot, I actually bought another one in Liverpool, in New South Wales. So that's a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1-car space. Very old building. Wasn't off the plan like the original one. So obviously I wasn't in the builder's warranty period or anything like that. Whatever is in the apartment, that's what I was getting in the condition that it was in. So that was also a different experience to have, because I've just bought an older style apartment with, only so many problems that you can predict as far as your building reports that you get done and everything else. Other than that, whatever comes at you after that is your problem, really. So having that property, I've had that since 2015.
Yeah.
So I bought that a year before I sold the previous one.
Yeah.
That one was my first proper renovation job in Liverpool.
I mean, you got stuck in there and did some...
Yeah, I did some physical labour in that one. So everything was basically ripped out in that place, from kitchen to bathroom basin. It was a new paint job, new flooring, new blinds. I put in a built-in wardrobe. I mean, it was a relatively small apartment, even though it was a 2-bedroom. But it was nice to be able to decide what tiles I want, what color I want things, and everything was up to me. So I put a budget together, sort of not really knowing what I was doing in a way. And I just worked it out bit by bit, section by section, just common sense things really, and anything I wasn't sure of. We've got Google, we've got contacts, we've got people we can call, and things, everything's researchable these days. And if not, there's professionals for those sorts of things.
And the renovation, your budget, if you don't mind me asking?
So the renovation budget, I gave myself about sort of between 10 and 15,000.
Yep.
I was willing to get a lot of quotes and get as best prices that I could get. It wasn't going to be a Rolls Royce of renovations in an old building in Liverpool. It was going to be a cosmetic type job just to spruce it up and basically increase the rent of that property.
Yep.
So I did end up spending about 16,000 on that renovation, so probably about 5% of the value at the time.
Yep.
And the renovations took me 4 weeks roughly to complete.
Yep.
So that was a combination of physical labour from myself, as well as hiring tradies, obviously like layering everybody up. So when you're squeezing renovations into a few weeks, you've got to make sure you have some sort of program or schedule so that you can layer people up. And I had to learn very quickly which trades to come first, which trades to come second, third, fourth, and having no knowledge of that before, I guess I'm lucky I work in the construction industry. I'm very strong with detail.
I've seen your spreadsheet, so they are me. Yeah.
And to make you water sometimes, like, it's good and bad having an eye for detail, because I'm so fixed on this has to be right, and I'm very stringent when it comes to details and organisation and things like that. So I think that's really helpful when you're doing a renovation by yourself. I sort of did my best I could.
You did well. And ultimate outcome, 2 things: increase in value and an increase in rental income.
Correct. Yeah. So in a matter of 4 weeks, I managed to increase the value of the property by about $60,000. Minus the $16,000 spent on renovations. It was about 18% increase. And in 4 weeks, I think I was, pretty happy with that. With the rental increase, it went up $70 a week with the rental increase. Yeah, so that was about a 25% increase. And I've still got that property.
Yep.
I have learned a lot of hard lessons with having that livable property. Just after I finished those renovations, it was heavily vandalised by the tenant.
Yep.
To the point where I could not walk in the place because I thought I might hurt myself. So the whole place had been torn apart by the tenant, and it was worst case scenario. And I kind of although it was a horrible thing to go through, it was a real learning curve having that happen on my second investment property, the absolute worst case scenario that you could imagine.
Yep.
And at the time, I just put in the hard physical labour of finishing the renovation. So to get a call from my property manager, Shane, and him telling me, I'm sorry to say, but I just showed up at your rental property after not being able to get hold of the tenants, and it's absolutely trashed. Like, police got involved. It was worst case scenario, basically. It's not what I signed up for. And I did have to come face to face with the tenant, who then had boyfriend issues and all sorts of stuff going on. It was just like at all ends. And I just sort of said to myself, this is what insurance is for.
Yep.
And try to look on the bright side. And in a way, I'm glad it happened then, and hopefully it doesn't happen to me again. But it really gave me a bit of thick skin for moving forward, because I just think, who cares if they trash it? Obviously it's an issue and it's a problem you have to deal with, but it's something that happens.
Yep.
That's why we have insurance in place, and it's okay at the end of the day.
Great attitude.
Yeah.
That setback may put investors off buying another property.
Very much
right?
so.
They kind of go, well, I'm done.
Yeah.
You went the other way and go, well, I'm going to buy and keep building my portfolio.
Yeah.
Which is a credit to yourself. So next, what happens after this property? Then, Kim, you buy your next property, which is in
next property I bought in Tamworth, in sort of rural areas. Tamworth, New South Wales, northern New South Wales. So I bought that 2 years later in 2017.
Yep.
It was a 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 car space property on about 700 square meters.
Yeah, great block. Yeah.
So that was my first house that I'd purchased, which was different again, because then you have land tax and you have all sorts of things. So every property that I buy is slightly different in type, which then again teaches me different lessons, and there's new things to learn for every different property that you get under your belt. So I bought that one, back in 2017, and it was very old inside. So carpet was very thick. It had all sorts of pattern blinds and yellow walls and
funky.
Yeah, it
the
smelled a bit
80s. Yeah.
strange. Yeah, it was very old. Like, it hadn't been renovated at all, probably since it had been built.
Yeah.
So I made the decision to tear it apart, basically, on the inside, and renovate the entire property from top to bottom.
Yeah.
One thing that I probably learned is not do a rural property in the middle of summer. It was
You don't like working 35 degrees.
No, it was sort of mid-40s. And when you're renovating a property, you don't have any air conditioning. So it was physically very, very demanding for me.
Yeah.
I thought Liverpool was demanding, but this is just on another level. And I was there every morning at, 6, 7 in the morning until late at night for 4 weeks straight. By myself, dealing with tradies, good and bad, dealing with attitudes and personalities and, aggro people and nice people, and just all sorts of things went on during that 4 weeks. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things was at the beginning of the 4 weeks, I was very stressed, not knowing, like thinking to myself, what am I doing? What have I got myself into? I'm renovating an entire house by myself.
Yeah.
I have a schedule, I have a budget, I have trades booked in. Some of those trades had pulled out, or there was some issue, and then I had to find someone else very last minute. Yeah. Originally, I had a builder that was going to come work for me because I was making some layout changes and I was worried about the structure of the roof.
Yeah.
But I had a colleague of mine have a look at the engineering of the roof, and it complied with the movements that I was doing.
Right.
So I was able to move forward with that. But that was a big learning curve of just sort of knowing it's not so bad to go into things that you fully don't have that thing worked out in your head. It's okay to take calculated risks. And I think the most successful people are the ones that dive into things they haven't fully got worked out yet.
Yep.
You just do it anyway.
A bit.
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. You can't work out everything before you start something. That's a journey that you go on.
Yeah.
And Tamworth was a big learning curve for me in that respect.
Yeah.
And in the end, it sort of it did work out for me because I went from after the valuation was done, after the 4 weeks had been had and the whole place was done.
Yep.
I sort of hired someone before it was fully finished.
Yep.
They knew that it was under renovation and they sort of starting to look for tenants and things like that. That went up. I got a 70% increase after those 4 weeks. Yeah, so I was happy with that, and I put about 13%, about 30K into that rental. And it was funny because at the time I was talking to the real estate agent, and she said that a guy up the road was doing renovation exactly the same time as me.
Yep.
The difference was he hired a project manager, and he probably spent another $20,000 than I did with a markup for hiring an external support. And he wasn't able to do half of the amount of things I was to do with the property from doing it myself.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe you can be resourceful, but you also need that sense of resilience as well.
Definitely. Like, being resourceful comes with that resilience, I think, because you not only have to go and do the things and find the people and do it yourself, but you also have to follow through and make sure you try and make the best decisions possible.
Yeah.
So that started out at $280 a week when I purchased it.
Yep.
When I finished the renovations, I was able to rent it out for $410 a week.
Incredible.
So, yeah, thank you.
And you haven't stopped there as well.
Yeah, so my fourth property that I purchased was last year in Katoomba in the Blue Mountains. So that was my first one that I did as a partnership with one other person.
Yep.
So we purchased that property. It had sort of been on my radar for at least 6 months, and it was one of my shortlisted items that I just kept an eye on. I have a list of properties that I keep an eye on to see where they're at and see where they're going. So that actually went under offer online for quite some time, and I saw it come back on the market, and I thought, something is wrong with this, which excites me.
When everyone's going one way, you go the other.
Correct. So I think one thing I learned from this particular property is sort of don't be afraid to buy the properties that no one else wants, because normally that means that your competition is a lot smaller. So in this case, this was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1-car space house on about 650 or 700 square metres of land. It was heavily termite damaged. So much to the point where we weren't sure how it was going to work as far as renovations. It wasn't a simple cosmetic renovation. It was a structural renovation. So we had a look at it. We made a very lowball offer that they accepted immediately. So originally it was on the market for $580 and we ended up getting it for $410. It's crazy. And I know that no one else wanted it because we got in hard and fast. We made the offer and they accepted. They obviously just wanted to get rid of it. It was previously owner occupied by an older lady, I believe. So she didn't want a headache of having to deal with it. One thing bad about it was obviously we didn't know how bad the termite damage was. You can only see what you can see. Anything behind the walls is when it starts to get interesting. And obviously we couldn't rip down the walls if we didn't own the place. So when we put together a renovation budget for that, it was absolute worst case scenario. So if we have to replace every piece of timber in this place, every possible wall, everything, this is how much it's going to cost. And we got lucky. We did get to keep some stuff. We had to replace some stuff. We ended up spending about $90K on that renovation. So it was completely gutted internally, down to the bricks. Luckily, it was a brick wall, so it was bricks on the side, completely gutted. We put an extra bedroom and an extra bathroom in to add some value. And that's another thing I learned from this property. It's really interesting to talk to valuers, professional property valuers, to see what are the tricks behind, your property can be valued higher if you have this characteristic or this detail. So knowing little things like that.
Looking for.
What values are looking for. Are they looking, how much will an extra bedroom give you roughly? How much will a new kitchen give you roughly? I understand higher ceilings give you a higher value. Just little things like that. So if I can incorporate those into my renovations without making a huge difference to the budget, you can just add those characteristics and push up the valuations that are hopefully going to be provided by the bank. Another thing I learned from yourself, Aaron, is that you can shop around for valuations, which I didn't know at the start of all of this, many years ago. Just because one bank gives you a valuation of $500,000, it doesn't mean the next bank is not going to value a property at $550,000, and that's another $50K of equity. So a lot of people that I speak to that sort of don't do things like this as a hobby, they have no idea that you can do that. And they think I'm mad that I even think that. But I'm like, it's a real thing. You can actually do it. Might cost you a couple $100 getting an additional valuation. The trade-off is massive if you can get a higher valuation. So for this property, as I said, we bought it for $410. We put about $90K of equity into it. That took 5 weeks, those renovations. So that was day in, day out, like darkness to darkness. Every single day we were in there renovating. Did all the demolition ourselves, did most of the handy work ourselves. I learned how to build timber framing for the inside of a house, and I love using a nail gun now. But it really helps me as far as learning a lot of trade tips and so forth. So after all was said and done, 5 weeks later, the property was valued at $700K. So that was I think it was 70% increase on a property that's not worth $100,000. 70%'s a fair bit. And I think at the time it was owner occupied, so it's hard to say the rental value, but I think we valued it, estimated it around $400 per week.
Yeah.
So after it was finished, we obviously wanted to rent it out, and we're still holding on to that property at the moment. Another thing I learned from this property is if you are confident with your market knowledge and you feel as though you can get a better price on something or a better rental appraisal, and just be confident in your own voice and say what you want to say. And I was pretty confident that we'd be able to get $550 a week, and our rental agent at the time was like, we believe it's around the $450 mark.
Yeah.
And I said to my partner, no, we're keeping it at $550. He said, all right, if that's what you think it's worth.
Yeah.
And within 2 weeks, it was off the market at $550. Yeah. So.
Guns.
Yeah. So.
Well done, Kim. And I can only imagine there's something brewing in the background for your next project.
Very much.
Yep.
I think the difference now is I was really getting to tread a thin line as far as my borrowing capacity and things like that. And probably just over the last month or two, I felt like the banks are changing.
Yeah.
Things are changing as far as their rules behind how they assess people and at what percentage, what interest rate and things like that. And I feel like just things are changing a little bit. So that might change for me personally as far as how easy it will be to get the next one. I mean, if someone gave me $5 million tomorrow, I would spend it all in a very short amount of time on property, because there's always something I'm looking at. So, I'm very keen to get the next one and the one after that and the one after that. I'm just looking at other avenues and other things and other ways of, making money, whether it be investment property or some other way, developments. There's a lot of different ways you can make money. Some people decide to flip, some people decide to hold, some people decide to renovate, some people decide to wait. One of the things with buying Tamworth was the fact that for those people who don't have a lot of funds under their belt, it's a really good way to get yourself into the property industry on a lower level as far as the cost of property. Really good entry point. And you can get some larger rural towns that have their own sort of smaller scale capital growth. People think if you buy in like a country town, you're buying for the cash flow only. But in my experience, if you get a larger rural town, you can get the best of both worlds. It's just watching the trends and seeing what's out there and studying different areas I've found is really helpful as well. So when I'm looking for property, that's what I like to do.
And at some point, your study will then, or your research will lead you to a point to pull the trigger as well. So a lot of people can get stuck in detail and not have the confidence or not have the willingness to kind of pull the trigger and move forward. And I think you've had that in spades, Kim, since I've seen you. Since your first property through to now, the confidence has grown. Your portfolio's grown, and that's been nothing but yourself that's dug your heels in and said, I want to learn along the way as well.
Thank you.
I think a lot of investors maybe outsource their thinking. Whereas I think and I think you've done nothing special, ordinary. It's not taking anything away from you. Just go.
No, I haven't done anything special.
You don't have any family.
I've just done it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that's the biggest difference that investors will see. Will flip and flop a little bit, whereas you've taken massive action. I think it's a huge credit to yourself, Kim, which is why we're so lucky to have you here, which is why I'm so grateful that you've come on and really appreciate you sharing, intimate details of your own personal portfolio as well. Thank you very much. I really hope that you found that helpful. Hearing from someone that's tread the path, hearing from someone that's walked in your shoes as an investor is super powerful. And Kim, thank you very much. If you found this episode helpful, insightful, educational, please leave us a review. Love to hear your feedback or share with your friends and family. So until next time, that's a wrap. Thank you very much.